Your brain gets healthy. And when you let go of like all the substances that you used to use for comfort, your body starts to heal itself in unique ways. And this is basically just telling your body to turn back on a lot of its healing mechanisms that have been turned off. We never know what our barrier is until we figure out what that 7-year-old is keeping from us.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Money School Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Naugle, and this show, as you probably already know, is all about taking back control of your money. And we're going to teach you a lot of different money strategies, but today we're going to not teach a money strategy. We're going to teach a strategy that fixes your mental barriers, your subconscious barriers. So let me start and preface by saying this. I've been on a long journey in entrepreneurship. I've done this since 16 years old. Every company I've ever built, I have hit different plateaus of revenue, different plateaus of problems where my mind has kept me stuck, where I wanted to get to the next level, but for some reason or another, I stayed where I was. I couldn't punch through. I wasn't willing to let go of something. Sometimes it was external things like things going on at home, things going on with my daughter, things going on with my wife. All this external noise I brought to work with me. I held it close and I wasn't focused. I wasn't able to go through it. I had to let something go. What is that I had to let go? What is that 7-year-old inside of me called the subconscious telling me or not allowing me to do? Or what am I not allowing it to do is probably the better way to frame that. This is going to be an awesome podcast because it's going to be something that every one of you are going to go through in your journey to getting to different levels of wealth, different levels of success. You're going to be held back and you're not going to know why. But Annie Yatch, my guest today, is the leadership coach that teaches people how to break these barriers, how to talk to that little 7-year-old that is kicking and screaming and sometimes being a little bastard, no disrespect to your subconscious. But we got to talk the language that matters to ourselves. Annie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris. I'm so thrilled to be here.
So I know that in my journey, I've had lots of different barriers that I haven't been able to get through. And a lot of times I've literally thought that the best way to get where I was to go around the barriers, the self barriers, the self-talk, instead of just going through the obstacle. And I love that book, The Obstacle is the Way. But can you just start by talking a little bit about what it is that holds all of us back? And it doesn't matter who we're talking about. We're talking about entrepreneurs. We're talking about leaders, high-powered, professionals, or just the average person working the 9 to 5, just trying to say, how do I get to the next level?
I love that question. I love that question because the secret really is for everything that holds us back is literally, what does your 7-year-old tell you every day in your subconscious? The subconscious runs about 11 million data points every second. Your conscious brain only runs 40. So your subconscious is talking to you all the time and it's running 97% of your life, right? So what does this 7-year-old tell your subconscious that he or she learned when he went through or she went through the most difficult time of his or her life? So I always like to talk to that 7-year-old because the 7-year-old has all the answers for everything that's holding you back, has all the answers for why you're self-sabotaging, has all the answers for why you might be thinking that you have imposter syndrome. And if we get to know that 7-year-old, we get to know the lie, the greatest untruth that runs that subconscious brain.
Wow. Why is our subconscious referred to as a 7-year-old? Now, I mentioned that earlier, but that's because we were talking off stage about like that 7-year-old. Why do you call it a 7-year-old?
Well, I've been calling it the 7-year-old because usually between the age, 7 to 10 is when we create the biggest program that runs most of our subconscious. Okay. And it doesn't have to be something big. The thing that most of us as entrepreneurs, we don't like hearing the word trauma. We don't like associating ourselves with trauma. But what I've found is that really the entrepreneur has grown up in some level of trauma. And that is why we like to fix so many problems. That's why we go after solving chaos. That's why, we feel really comfortable where lots of fires are going on and we're putting all the fires out. But that 7-year-old basically decides something when he's really little. And he decides that there is a truth that he now believes is real. It's a survival program, almost like an operating system for a computer. And that little 7-year-old is like, this is the only system I know that will help me survive. And so this 7-year-old will put into different contexts in your entire life the same program over and over and over again until eventually you see it or you hit a revenue barrier. And that's usually when we start looking at ourselves and asking, well, why are we doing this? Why are we still stuck? Why aren't we moving forward the way we want to? It's usually because that program from that little 7-year-old is no longer useful to get you to the next level. So that's what our caps typically are mentally.
I've never really said this in public or on anything, but, there was a time where I was trying to figure some things out in my life, trying to figure out why I couldn't just be happy. A lot of the things you just mentioned. And I worked with this doctor who probably very much like you worked in the subconscious world. And he had me go through this exercise, and this is very strange. And I don't know how to say this without sounding silly, but what we came through is he did this exercise, and I thought it was the stupidest thing ever. And I wrote everything down. I played along. I'm like, I'm just wasting money paying this guy. And at the end of it, he kind of broke it all down. And what it all came down to, and folks, some of you are going to know what I'm talking about. Some of you are not. It came down to a movie that when I was literally 7 years old, which was a critical period of time in my life. Okay. And it was a critical period of time in my life because my parents had divorced when I was 5. I was figuring that out. I was, split family now. I had these passions, but that movie that all this came back down to was the movie Rad. Now, Rad is a movie about a guy, Crew Jones, who lived with a single mom. Okay, had a sister, which I did not have a sister, but everything in his world was about this BMX, and he basically had everything against him. And this big outfit, the owner of Mongoose Bikes, came to this tiny little town to put on this massive national event called Hell Track, and it was only for professional BMX riders, but they ended up getting in because it wasn't for amateurs, but he found a way to push and get himself into the race. He was the underdog. And I mean, the rest of the movie is he did everything and he won the race. And that movie, I probably watched it 100 times. I watched it so many times that the VHS tape no longer played normally. It kind of, if anyone's old enough to remember that was a thing. But that movie has shaped my entire life. And I didn't know it until he did that. But like everything in my life has been about competition, from pro snowboarding to my entrepreneur businesses, to me always being competitive, always having to be first, always doing everything that is required to get there. And it all comes back to one video, one movie when I was 7 years old. Sorry I went long on that, but that's just ironic.
It's so beautiful, though, because, once you're able to see that, I'm sure you're able to see more of the patterns, right, that have run your life. So just like you said, right, competition, always wanting to be first, always proving yourself, right? That just means that there's going to be this gap or this void in you that if you're not proving yourself, if you're not competing, if you're not first, you're going to feel like you're failing.
Absolutely.
And it can be very, very brutal for the mental, emotional state.
But not just brutal for my mental state, like it's very stressful. It creates massive amounts of trauma, but also very difficult for my family because I just was telling my wife this the other night, like I cannot pull away. I mean, I run a lot of different companies. It's very busy. I can't disconnect. She's like, why can't you just try to get home in a normal hour? I'm like, I can't finish what I'm doing. She's like, the work will be there tomorrow. I'm like, yeah, but
it's an open loop. It's an open loop in your brain.
Yeah. I can't pull myself out of it. And it's a problem. I mean, I feel like I've gotten better since my daughter was born because now I have this external force that like brings me back to that original 7-year-old when my parents weren't there. I don't want to ever have her go through that. But you're right. It is this.
It doesn't mean that you're turning off your brain. It doesn't mean you're turning off your brain, though. Even when you're going back to your family, right? Your brain still doesn't turn off. You're still running at 1,000,000 miles a minute, right? And what that actually is, Chris, that is a nervous system that has been hijacked by stress hormones. Okay. So one of the biggest things I find with all the entrepreneurs I work with is that the very first thing we look at is how do we calm the nervous system enough so that you can go home, you can just rest, and you don't have to be constantly spinning in your mind around all the different things that you're working on for all the different businesses. Because I've worked with entrepreneurs who are, from 1 million upwards of 1.2 billion. And it's the same thing that we get caught in because of this competition drive, need to always be first, high performer. We've been conditioned since we were kids to be high performers, right? And we really have to look at how do we redefine success for ourselves if we want to calm our nervous systems and get out of that for our families.
I've only found 2 things in my life, only 2, that have been able to allow me to truly disconnect to truly find what I would call my true self. And those two things are surfing and snowboarding. And I've even found as I've gotten older, like, and I can't snowboard or surf at the level that I once was able to. I found myself like sometimes not being able to hold that moment of just clarity. Like, but when I'm on my snowboard and I'm not, teaching my daughter doing anything, I'm just free to do what I want. Like I do. I literally just erase everything. I get into this crazy flow, and there's some weird things that happen when you're in that flow. And I've seen it in both snowboarding and surfing. I start to hear things differently. Like I hear nature a lot more. Sounds become more pronounced. I don't know why, but it's always the birds that I notice when I'm in that flow. And I don't notice them any other time except for early in the morning when I'm running and when I'm in that flow. And they are very vivid. But then I can, and here's the other hard thing. It's kind of like meditation, you get different levels of meditation, but like once you realize it's happening, once you realize, oh my God, I'm in the flow, it's gone. And then all of a sudden, like, then you almost have to restart it and be like, damn, why couldn't I hold on to that?
Well, I think what you're talking about is what almost all high performers and elite, military guys go through, right? Because everyone's always searching for the flow. I was married to a Navy SEAL for 15 years. And what we discovered when we were going through his healing journey is that he literally only felt calm or in the flow state when he was either snowboarding, right? Or when he was skydiving with the parachute team. And he was like, for 8 minutes, it is the most beautiful feeling of my life. And he realized, he's like, I got to go off and get those hits. I got to get those dopamine hits. Once we calmed his nervous system, one day he just woke up and he's like, I don't even need that anymore. He's like, because everything feels so good. It feels like I'm in a flow state, even though I'm not doing a lot of these activities that I previously needed to do. And that's when he got very present for our family. And it changed the whole dynamic of everything in our lives together, which was wild.
So you're saying I should just jump out of a perfectly good airplane. I can do it.
No, I'm not. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is no jumping out of airplanes, but having surfing and snowboarding is incredible. I just think that there's a way to calm the nervous system, like change the neurochemistry of the brain for most of us as entrepreneurs. If you've ever seen the movie Limitless, there's actually a technology that expands the brain that movie was based on. And I know the company that does it. And so from my perspective, when I found them 7 years ago, I was like, this is the missing link for all entrepreneurs to calm our nervous systems that allow us to make choices from a neutral place instead of from that amperage space that we usually run in. So I've been thankful that I've been able to help a lot of people get out of that space, because it is really hard to be present with your family when your brain's running at 1,000,000 miles a minute and you have all these open loops that you haven't been able to close.
Wow. All right. So we're gonna stay with that movie for just a little bit, because I've watched that movie a lot of times and I've always wanted that, but I didn't want the outcome, we don't
want the outcome. Right.
But at the end, he figured it out, right? He got past that at the very end of the movie. Like, how many of you have seen that movie? In the comments, write something that movie meant for you. Like, all of you wanted that, right? You wanted to be in that state where your mind worked, all of it, and you were able to accomplish amazing things. Like I could almost verbatim talk about all those parts, but you said that's actually based on some actual real life shit.
Yeah, based on real life shit.
Like, do I just have to go to like some, underground place and get this?
No, it's not an underground place, but I got to tell you, back before I found this company, my ex-husband lived in 9 out of 10 levels of pain. And he was a Navy SEAL for 10 years, right? So 18 surgeries, really intense stuff. He wasn't sleeping maybe more than 45 minutes a night. And I'll never forget, I had found this company and I'm like, is this really real? And so I took him out to do the highest level of their supplement. And the first time they put it into his mouth, he went from a 9 out of 10 levels of pain to 2 out of 10. He calmed so quickly. All this like color came back into his face, and he turns over and he looks at me and he's like, I've sort of been a jerk to you for a couple of years, huh? And I was like, oh my God, he's back. Because, when you're an entrepreneur, he and I used to work 18-hour days. We were always churning and burning, grinding, like coming up with all these new ideas. We had 3 different companies and we thought we were making such a huge impact, but we were miserable inside because we weren't feeling fulfilled by what we were doing. And we had all these open loops all the time. And when they put this stuff into his mouth, I literally remember looking at him and he's like, this is going to be such a difference. He's like, I don't feel amped. I don't feel like I am jacked on anything. I don't feel like I need anything like adrenaline. He's like, this is going to be a very different way to build business. And that was when we sort of started that whole process and started learning more about the nervous system and the neurochemistry.
Okay, but is there really a way to get your brain to work more efficiently and use more of its capacity? I mean, what is it that they say we use of our brain?
Well, I think that what I've heard the scientists talk about a lot is the fact that we only have about 10 to 15% of a functioning microbiome. And so the microbiome is the bacteria, basically the bacteria biome of our body that runs a lot more than we think. And so when you only have a 10 or 15% functioning microbiome, your brain isn't going to feel as clear. You're going to be more amped than you need to be. You're going to be looking for dopamine hits pretty consistently. The big difference I saw was that when he and I were in that space before we did the technology, we were both saying yes to things we shouldn't have said yes to in business. We were making really quick choices on things that we didn't know were bad choices, but we just didn't have the mental capacity to think it through in a different way. And then afterwards, like just for some numbers, we went from probably churning at like 30 to 40,000 for each one of our businesses per month to, I think, the second or third month after doing the technology, I figured out with him a way that we could churn at 185,000 a month. So like huge jump there in revenue that we were able to create just because our brains were more healthy.
Was it sustainable?
Oh, yeah. I mean, even though he and I are now divorced, he's gone on to be incredible in what he's working on. I'm doing really well in what I'm working on. We've completely shifted our lives so that we have much more connectivity for our kids. Like life is so good now. And we're like, can you imagine what it would have been like if we hadn't done that? So we've just been super grateful that we found the company and we found what they do. And it is literally like you take a pill, but you start slow and you ease up to the higher levels of the stuff.
Well, I find it strange. You called it technology. So when I think of technology, I think of like true tech, like software and all these different things. So why, if it's just a pill or just a supplement, if you will, why would we call it technology?
Well, their company calls it technology because you're basically rebooting your entire body, right? So like if you think about it, right, we wouldn't want to have like an iPhone from the very beginning stages of the iPhone, right? We'd want all the upgrades. We want to have the iPhone 16, right? Because there are always upgrades happening to technology and our bodies are very similar, right? If we do the right things and we optimize our DNA and our biome, then really we can keep adjusting and improving the body that we're given and the brain that we're given. And so they call it technology because it is an upgrade for your cellular function. It's an upgrade for how your biome works. So you go from like 10% of a microbiome that functions to 20% or 25%. And a lot of things come online that you wouldn't be aware of, like your smell changes. You can smell more. Like I can sit next to somebody on a plane and I can smell, I know this sounds weird, but I can smell like all the drugs that they've taken that day. Like I can tell if they're a drinker, if they're on any level of narcotics. It's the strangest thing because now my smell is heightened.
My wife must be taking this because I'm telling you, if I have a beer at 3:00, she can smell it at 8 p.m. at night. Which
your wife might just be magical though. Who knows? She might have otherworldly powers.
Didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no, don't worry. But it's things like that, right? That you aren't even aware of. Like we came back and I remember my ex literally looked at me and he's like, I've got an idea for how we can change the business. I'm like, me too. And we started talking about it. It was not like a 5X to the business. It was a 10X to the business. And we had never had that thought before. And so it's amazing to see when your brain gets healthy and when you let go of like all the substances that you used to use for comfort, like everything from alcohol to even caffeine. I haven't been on caffeine for 7 years. Your body starts to heal itself in unique ways. And this is basically just telling your body to turn back on a lot of its healing mechanisms that have been turned off because of the stress or the chaos or the things that you've taken or put into your body that aren't as good for it.
Your real estate business lives and dies by the network and the connections that you make. I mean, after all, your network, well, it's your net worth. That's what you always heard, right? If that's an area where you desire improvement, well, Private Money Club, it's for you. PMC saves you precious time and money by bringing the real estate world, well, right to you, right in the palm of your hand. So get in on the action like so many others have by going to privatemoneyclub.com and sign up.
Unreal. So let's just unpack a couple of those things you said. So I understand why they call it technology. It kind of makes sense, but doesn't make sense. But you had mentioned the iPhone. Now, this is another thing I really don't ever talk about. So we have these things that do all this stuff for us. And I find myself now that we have so much in our, power in our hand with these stupid phones, that all I can think of wanting to do is I literally want to go back to when I didn't have this, back to when my phone flipped open and you couldn't do anything. Maybe you could text, but you had to hit the button like 5 times for one letter. Like, I find myself struggling to the point where, like, I kind of want to go backwards. I want to go back to that day when I didn't have all this power in my hand. I want to go back to the day where I wasn't as connected as I am. And all those memories, that 7-year-old thing takes me back to a time when I was younger, when I was literally just chasing my dream, pro snowboarder, doing the things I love to do. And I didn't have all this noise in my life. So, like, I struggle right now with that. Like, I'm literally trying to find ways to get through to these parts, these breakthroughs in my business. So literally it affords me the ability to be able to go back to those days. Not that I think I ever will, but I'm trying. I think this is a big struggle for me. I'm trying to buy my way back to a simpler life. And that sounds weird to me, but that's truly, literally what I'm trying to do, is buy back my time.
No, it sounds beautiful. I mean, that's what I think all of us want as entrepreneurs, right? The only reason why many of us become entrepreneurs is because we want the freedom to dictate the choice that we have and how we spend our time, how we spend our energy. So, the one thing I can tell you is a lot of the noise goes away the more you calm your nervous system, right? Because, like, the thing I would tell you, right? We used to have 3 businesses. I know it's probably not as many businesses as you have, right? And we probably weren't as successful as you are. But what was really clear for us as we went through this process was, oh my gosh, all the noise falls away the more calm your body is. So, like, we used to worry about the phone and all these people calling us all the time and having to do all these, podcasts and interviews. And I mean, we were all over the place. And then the second we did the calming stuff, we basically were like, you know what? We're not even going to look at our phones. It's not even an issue. When we want to get on our phones, we'll get on our phones. But we created a much more simplified life because our brain was already in that space of wanting that and not being as worried about all the other stuff. It was such a difference. It's just hard sometimes to remember how I was before, because when your brain is the mechanism that identifies damage in your body and it starts getting healthier, you literally don't remember how bad off it used to be, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. So let's get tactical with this. Like, so this limitless pill or supplement, like that we call it technology. Like, how does that work? I mean, you just just take me through the process.
Yeah, I'll take you through the process, because a lot of the entrepreneurs I work with, they'll do the internal work of the intellect, right? So we'll work on their intellect shifting out. Then we'll be like, okay, let's work on the emotional work and make that happen. But then you sometimes get stuck because the neurochemistry, the dopamine, the the serotonin, the oxytocin, it's not boosted enough for you to maintain some of the results that you want. And so really at that point, what I mentioned to everybody is, I'm like, well, how about we start calming the nervous system and boosting your neurotransmitters so that things can work a little bit easier for you. And it starts just with these sprays. I mean, it's like a little bottle. It looks like water. It tastes like water. You're like, is this a joke? Is this really water? But you spray it in your mouth and you end up sleeping longer at night. You end up having more vivid dreams. You end up feeling like you can handle any amount of stress. It's just the weirdest thing. But you start with sprays and you just take them at night before you go to bed, and your sleep changes. And from your sleep changing, then you can add more. So they have a bunch of different capsules that you can take that either boost your dopamine or boost your serotonin, and it boosts it naturally. So you're not putting a drug into your body. You're literally just nudging the healthy bacteria to produce more, so that the healthy bacteria then tell your brain, she needs more serotonin. Let's produce more serotonin. She needs more dopamine. Let's let her produce more dopamine. So it's all an organic product that does this, which is, I think, the most incredible piece of the whole thing, because it's not like you're putting a drug into your system to change the neurochemistry. You're just reminding your body, oh, this is what it feels like when I'm feeling good and I have more of the good neurochemicals.
And who builds this schedule, and who knows how to build this schedule of what you take for your particular body type or, your goals?
So honestly, from my perspective, I've just been like studying this stuff for a while with them. I don't think that they have it all dialed in per se. Like, the woman who runs it is really incredible at sensing a person and knowing what will be good for them. But what I've just done with individuals is I start everybody on the calming sprays if they want to take it. If they don't, that's fine. It's not mandatory. And then from there, as we figure out like what really is the gap in their neurochemistry, then you figure out what do they need. So a lot of people at the beginning need a lot of serotonin because they're so serotonin deficient. And so you would start with a capsule that's pro serotonin. And then over time, what I love is they have a capsule that allows you to, it makes you feel literally like you're elated, and you can take it after you or before you work out. And this capsule just makes your body feel so much stronger. And then you continue to build more muscle over time. And it's just a really powerful way to experience life. So I think at the beginning, you keep it sort of basic as you build more serotonin. Then once your serotonin is built and you fill in some of these potholes, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I could try this, or I could try that, or I could try this. So usually you work with their team and they help you figure out, well, what's the best strategy based on all the things that you've taken in the past to try to help yourself cope, but might not be the healthiest for the brain. So for a lot of people, if people have been on a lot of, a big thing right now is marijuana, right? So there are a lot of people taking a lot of marijuana to calm themselves because they take caffeine in the morning to amp themselves to get ready for the day. And so once if you want to release the marijuana that's on your receptors of your brain, you need something that's equal to or more powerful than that to kick it off. And so that's what this technology does as well. It kicks off a lot of the marijuana that's been stuck in your receptors, then your receptors are more clear. Just a really cool experience. But there's a lot more of the science and technology that I'm not going into here because I'm not a chemist. I'm just somebody who's loved watching, clients and friends and everybody get healthier and love their lives more. So
That is pretty wild. And yes, I have seen that. I've never really been a marijuana guy. I mean, obviously used it back when I was younger. It just, number one, I eat a whole hell of a lot when, if I smoke or, take marijuana. And number two, I feel like I'm not in control. And I just can't do that. Like that not in control. Some people would say that's that relaxed phase. I guess I don't like that. So
no, not as an entrepreneur. No, because if you're
Yeah,
relaxed, then you're going to feel guilty for
yes,
not getting stuff done. But this is the biggest thing that all entrepreneurs fall into. It's the guilt when they actually have a moment to rest. And I'll tell you this, you probably know this for a fact, but the wives of entrepreneurs who watch you guys suffer, it hurts our hearts so badly that you can't ever rest. And we know that you're doing it because there's a part of you that's trying to provide for the family and provide this beautiful life and give us all these incredible experiences. But all we want is for the man that we love to be able to rest and to find an escape in the family and the connection of the relationship. And that's the biggest gift I think that this technology does for men. Because I work with a lot of men as clients and they're always like, Annie, I'm so calm, so present with my spouse. She keeps telling me get more of whatever Annie's giving you because this is great stuff, So it's just, I wish that there were more entrepreneurs that knew that this kind of thing existed because it would change how we do business and it would change how we do business with our families even around us.
well, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that will watch this episode. I can tell you that. So you're all hearing it first, and maybe some of you need to go watch that movie Limitless and then come on and watch this podcast because you'll be like, oh, I need that. So
It really helps.
how would somebody go about working with you to get plugged into this technology and figure out what's right for them?
Well, I think the easiest way is, you can find me on Instagram. It's northstarleadership.annie, which is the fastest way. You can always DM me. But I think what would be helpful is, to spend a little bit of time thinking about what are you willing to give up? Are you willing to give up caffeine? Are you willing to give up marijuana? Are you willing to give up some of these daily drugs that we use to bring us comfort, but aren't necessarily taking us to the highest level of our own performance? And if you're willing to give that up, then it's a great opportunity to reach out and be like, all right, I'm ready for this next journey. What does this next level of my performance and my leadership for my family and myself really look and feel like? Because you have to be ready to really go after it. And I find that for a lot of people, we get so stuck in the cycle of business and we get so stuck in how our days normally look that it's hard to get off the hamster wheel.
Yeah, what's interesting is, I'm 47 now, and I've kind of gone through this whole thing where, especially when Vivi came into my life, she's 4.5 now, but a lot of things cycle down. I wouldn't say I ever drank a lot, but I used to socially drink like it was part of business to me. I made the excuse that I would go out and I'd go out with some guys and that was a business meeting. And now today, I barely drink. I haven't touched alcohol at my house, and I've got a stocked bar. I've got fridges full of beer. I'm just well, when we have a party, everybody can drink this stuff. I don't touch it and I don't want it. And even when I'm traveling and going out, a lot of times they'll just order you a drink and I just sip it all night long. I almost wait for the ice cube to melt just so that I can sip it. So that's like gone away. I've never, like I said, used drugs, but caffeine for sure. Like I don't even know how to get my day started without caffeine. So I'd have to let go, but it's just like, it's been this natural progression. And I guess looking back 10 years ago, would I ever have seen that? I'd be like, no, but it's naturally happened. And I think it's probably because of a lot of what you said. What are you willing to let go of? Like, I've been willing to let go of all those things because I knew that they slowed me down. I knew that when I was a kid and my dad came home drunk, because my dad was an alcoholic, I didn't like it as a kid. So I don't want my daughter to ever have to deal with that. Like, there's all these like little things. It's like, it's a give take. Like, I want this, therefore I can't have this. And it was just such an easy decision for me. So like with what you're saying, and folks, as you're listening, I keep using myself in a first person because I'm trying to make an example that, like, I'm a high performer, I'm running lots of businesses. I'm struggling with a lot of things, and I'm trying to find the path to them. Like so many of you at different levels, we're all at different levels, but like all of us are battling these demons, whatever the demon is, we're all battling it, but there is a path through it. And that's what Annie's talking about, is like literally like this technology, if you will, like this could be the path through. But like I always say to people, I have to literally tell people almost on a weekly basis, I have to understand who my client is not, so that I can understand who my client is, because I can't help somebody that's not willing to help themselves. And that's kind of what you said, Annie. Like, you can't help somebody get to this level if they're not willing to give something up, if they're not willing to take the steps that are necessary. And it would be completely worthless for you, no matter how much somebody was willing to pay you.
Right.
Like, if they aren't willing to do what's necessary to get there, to put in the work, like, you're actually never could have became a Navy SEAL without literally doing things that everybody else is unwilling to do. Because like a Navy SEAL is like the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. They have to give a lot up to get where they're at. But it's an honor when they're there. But then to maintain that is also another thing. So folks, when you're looking at this and you're thinking about what Annie's saying, like literally just realize, like, it's not just, I wish it was like limitless. We just take a pill and hey, now all of a sudden our brain.
No, you got to do the work when you're taking the boost, right? You always have to do the work. I love that.
Like you work with a lot of high performers, and I know you can't use their names, but can you just kind of give us some like case studies of like some people you've seen just miraculous turnarounds?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a couple if you want. So I had one person the other day, they got their system calm. We had done a little bit of work, couple of sessions, and he calls me out of the blue and he's like, I just saved my company $700,000. And I was like, why do you think that happened? He's like, I'm so calm. I saw it. He's like, I couldn't see it before. I have never in 7 years seen the solution. He's like, I've been on this stuff for 2 weeks. He's like, literally, I was looking at my finances and I saw the gap. So that's one example. Okay. Another gentleman, we were doing some work on his trauma pattern. He had been stuck at $2 million a year, and he was stuck at $2 million a year because when he was 15, his dad died, and his dad had only ever made $2 million. So every time he'd go towards $2 million, he thought he was going to die. He'd make himself very sick. He'd end up in the hospital. So we started unraveling, what did all that mean? And what was the story that little 7-year-old kid was telling him? And what ends up happening is, as soon as we figured out that story and we put some, tools in his toolkit so that he could be out of that space mentally, he took his company to IPO status.
Wow.
It's wild, right? So those are two examples. Another gentleman, he used to make the same $9 million mistake every 4 or 5 years because he was constantly trying to prove himself and wouldn't do the due diligence on his deals. We identified where that came from, rewired that pattern, and he has never made that mistake again. And he has taken off and built 2 different businesses that are now generating over $5 million a year. So it's those types of stories, right? We never know what our barrier is until we figure out what that 7-year-old is keeping from us. And when we figure that out, we can step into much higher levels of our own performance, and we can show up better for our families, which is why I do it, honestly, Chris, because I've been through a very intense experience as an entrepreneur where my spouse and I were both entrepreneurs together. And it broke my heart to watch how he got farther and farther away from us and our family because he was shouldering such a heavy burden all the time. And he couldn't be present, and he was always wanting to be there, but his brain was always running so much. I was like, we've got to save these men because you guys do so much and you provide so much. You create such an incredible community and, business for people. You're impacting thousands. But if you are miserable, then the family can't love you as much as they want to love you. It's a really tough thing that we put ourselves into as entrepreneurs.
I love that. So let's go back to the top. If someone wanted to learn more about this and get a hold of you, where would they go?
They would just go right to northstarleadership.annie on Instagram. They could DM me.
Leadership. Is that technology?
No, it's not. The technology is different. The technology is Biome Tech, but their website, they're about to upgrade it now. They haven't been very much under the radar for probably the last 30 years. So they've been around for 30 years, making incredible changes in people's lives, but they haven't really exploded yet, which is very awesome for the people that have learned about it. So I would say you can go to the website, but it's pretty confusing. I would say if you're willing to let me help you and support you and sort of direct you down the path, that might make it a little bit easier.
So one more time, and I know people need to hear things
Yes.
3 times. North Star Leadership.
.Annie, ANNIE, and that's on Instagram. And then the company that has this amazing technology is called Biome Tech.
Okay.
The website is a little confusing. So I would say if you have questions, please, just reach out to me personally. I've done this for so many people because all I care about is that we all need to be in a healthier state so we can create a bigger ripple effect of greatness in the world, help more people live a better life.
I'm going to do everybody a solid and put this in the description because I'm going to be going on Instagram and sending Annie a message there just to kind of learn more about this and kind of just see what this process looks like. How time consuming is this process, and then what are the costs for it? So those are going to be my things. I'm sure you all have those questions, and I would assume those are all going to vary based on the person's needs and goals because, listen, we're all different. We're all different
Everyone's
stages.
different. Everyone's neurochemistry is different too, for sure.
Well, this has been really interesting,
Good.
really enlightening, something that I think I'm definitely very intrigued, and I'm sure everybody watching this is very intrigued. So folks, we'll put that up there, northstarleadership.annie with 2 N's. I think you all know how to spell that. And then Biome Tech, which I'm not even going to go to that. I'm just going to go to you and you can kind of fill me in. So folks, I hope you've enjoyed this, a little journey to your 7-year-old subconscious self and the struggles you're going through, the things that are holding you back. And it's time to have a little sit down talk with that 7-year-old and be like, hey, listen, bud, you got to kind of help me out here. Because if you know everything, let's get past this movie Rad and this having to always be competing, always be winning, which is stressing me the F out, man. Come on, let me get there a different way. So with that being said, Annie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Chris. I loved every moment.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, folks, for joining us for this episode of the Money School Podcast. Now go out there and take control of your money, learn how to be the bank, and why don't you pick the phone up and call that 7-year-old subconscious self by getting a hold of Annie and finding out how you can be limitless. We'll see you on the next one.